Babies. Good evening and welcome. Tonight we will continue our read through of this book, History as It Happened. Now, if you're new to my channel, welcome. Thank you for clicking on this video. But if you're new to this series, I have not read this book in advance. We're exploring it together. So I don't know what to expect. I don't know what facts are going to pop up. There could be mistakes I make that I leave in for you guys. It's all very raw and real. You guys seem to enjoy that. And I do too, because I don't have to prep for anything for this video. I just go right in. So without further ado, let's get started. So I've bookmarked over here all of the maps that we're going to look at. Again, I haven't read them. I just looked at the titles and slapped a post-it note on it without reading it. I almost skipped some too by accident. But let me show you the table of contents so we can really see tonight's theme. So this book is separated by continents. You can see Africa is over here. There's Asia, Europe, so on and so forth. So we already looked at the maps of today, so on and so forth. So we're going to look at the chapters that say the land. So we have Northern Africa, the land, Sub-Saharan Africa, the land, West and Central Asia, the land, etc. So all the ones that end in the land, I assume, are just going to be geographic maps and facts about the geography of each continent. Again, I don't know. I haven't learned them. So let's get into it. I'm very excited. You guys have no idea how many times I've had to resist just grabbing this book and reading it front to back because I want to so bad. But I'm saving it for us to do it together. Have this posted. So starting with Northern Africa, the land. And I've got my brush here so we can brush the maps together. Northern Africa, the land. Make sure you can see. The desert of the Sahara Desert. Okay. The desert of the Sahara Desert dominates the landscape of the northern third of Africa, almost completely covering the area. Formed millions of years ago, the Sahara stretches more than 3.3 million square miles, or 8.6 million square kilometers, making it the world's largest hot desert. The sheer size of the Sahara has had a massive impact on the spread and progress of human societies within the region. Yeah, I don't want to get into it because I might mention it, but typically, pretty much all of the countries that are up here are Muslim countries. And as you go further down, it's like everything but Muslim countries, right? And that's because there's this big old desert just separating the cultures here. So like Northern Africa along the Mediterranean coast is a very distinct series of cultures here that you just don't find anywhere else in Africa because there's a big old desert. And there's all these little landforms here. There's the Libyan Desert, the Tibesti Mountains, the Ahagar Mountains, or I know them as the Hagar Mountains, but okay. So on and so forth. So let's see this first box, between desert and sea. Most settlements in northern Africa are sited along the coast, far away from the hostile environment of the desert. These cities have histories that are often more closely linked to other Mediterranean sites than the lands south of the Sahara. In ancient times, Carthage, in modern-day Tunisia, traded across the Mediterranean until it was destroyed by its rival Rome. And here's a great picture here of what's left of Carthage, a place I very much want to visit someday. You can see the ocean in the background. And the ruins there. Up here. In Tunisia. Let's see this box here. It says desert trade. We've got little camels there going across this gorgeous desert. The few permanent settlements that exist in the Sahara are based near sources of water. These oases have formed the basis of trade routes across the desert throughout history, with caravans once carrying gold or salt from the kingdoms to the south. Camels of the Tuareg nomads carry the goods of trade caravans across the desert. Pretty great photo there. I think that's my favorite one on this page. But here's a great photo of the Sahel, which I always bring up whenever we're talking about the Sahel on my channel, about how it's not quite desert, not quite like forested. And that's a good example here. You can see all of the trees and the greenery, but in a deserty landscape. It's a mixture of both, the Sahel. At the southern edge of the Sahara lies the Sahel, a border region between the desert and the tropical savanna to the south. There is just enough plant life growing here for the Sahel's inhabitants to keep livestock, but it's a delicate balance, and over-farming can lead to droughts and food shortages. The dry season in the Sahel lasts for 8 months of the year, so only a few crops can survive here. That's the sound of my cat Chichekwai bringing his toys in here. He's got to have his little baby bug near him, so he's got that. And the beautiful Sahel region, which is this like light greeny area here, right? Combination of desert and the rainforest area down here. And here is, of course, the Nile River, which flows up this way. There's the Aswan Dam up to the delta there. The Nile River. The thin strip of fertile land along the edges of the Nile River was the site of ancient Egypt, one of the world's earliest civilizations. Protected from invaders by deserts on either side, ancient Egyptian culture survived for 3,000 years. Fertile farmland borders the banks of the Nile, but this soon gives way to deserts. Here's the Nile River flowing past. You can see all of the trees growing alongside it, and then beyond is all of these deserty mountains. Because everything over here is just desert, desert, desert. A bit more desert before you reach the Red Sea over here. See all these little boxes here in the Sahara. It says more than 99% of Egyptians live along the banks of the Nile. The Nile Delta was once a bay of the Mediterranean Sea, but has been filled in over time by fertile silt brought down to the sea by the Nile. I'm going to say, is there something on my brush, but it's the bristles got all distorted. Okay, anyway. Yeah, there's the Nile River Delta. The Chott el Djerid, right here, or the Chott el Djerid is an enormous salt lake that marks the northern boundary of the Sahara in Tunisia. You can kind of see it there, all this white. Mountain ranges such as the Ahaggar are home to animal and plant species that would otherwise not survive in the harsh conditions of the Sahara. I assume like fennec foxes and such, and various birds. The Atlas Mountains protect coastal farming areas of Morocco and Algeria from the growing desert. There's the Atlas Mountains right along here. And heading out here to the islands, various islands in the Atlantic there. Far from being barren, the Sahara contains unique animals and plants and has supported nomadic humans for thousands of years. Sahara Desert. Alright, I think that's the land of Northern Africa. Let's see what's next. Sub-Saharan Africa. That makes sense, doesn't it? Saharan Africa and then Sub-Saharan Africa. The land. South of the Sahara, the African continent is rich with natural resources. The problem is how to reach them. Fast-flowing rivers, dense rainforests, and disease-carrying mosquitoes make travel difficult. Many countries lack a transportation network to move things to where they are needed, so people in many areas rely on farming their own food to survive. Let's see what we've got here. First, we have the West African coast, all along here. You can see it's the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Gulf of Guinea, along the coast there. The lands in the west of Africa, south of the Sahara, contain fertile areas for farming and are rich in resources such as oil. But along the coast, mangroves, swamps, and beaches that form barriers can be obstacles to boat traffic, making trade difficult. Mangrove root systems can cause mud buildup at the mouths of rivers. So you can see back here all this green are mangrove trees, which grow in salt water along coastal areas. There's, looks like a river flowing, I guess, inland if it's salt water, maybe out mixing, maybe all brackish. Mangroves love brackish water. And then this is all the mud built up. We can find a lot of these, like along here. The mouths of the rivers along here. I think a bit along here as well. Here's the Congo Basin. See all this wonderful green? You can see right here, Congo Basin. The rainforests of the Congo Basin are rich in timber, but the land underneath also contains deposits of diamonds, gold, and the metal ore coltan, which is used to make mobile phones. The rainforests are also a massive barrier to trade routes. The humidity and wetlands are ideal conditions for mosquitoes carrying the disease malaria. Much of the Congo Basin is covered by humid rainforest and wetlands. And this looks like the Congo River here, with all of the beautiful greenery surrounding it. All of these thick, jungly trees around, full of life. The Congo is really beautiful to see from above because it's so distinct against all of this thick green. You can see all of these waterways throughout the Congo Basin stem pretty much from the Congo River, which is the world's deepest river. My manager's here checking up on things. Everything's going well, Jed. Thank you, baby. Next, we have powerful rivers. Rivers have been used as trading routes throughout history, but in Africa, the rivers are wide with strong currents and pass over many waterfalls and rapids. In the modern world, this difficulty is being turned into a benefit by Jen, as hydroelectric plants are built to make use of water power. The Mosi Oitunya, or Victoria Falls, is one of the many obstacles to trade along the Zambezi River. And that's pointing out the river here. You can see the Zambezi River flowing along. It says Victoria Falls is right here, and you can see, oh, I forgot the name of this dam. I think it starts with a K. Oh, that's on the tip of my tongue. But you can see all these lakes here. These are dams creating hydroelectric power, and they're massive lakes. Not as massive as the Great Lakes up here, which looks like we're going to talk about next, but very large nonetheless. And we can see gorgeous Victoria Falls down here. One of the most powerful, biggest waterfalls in the world. I always describe it as like picture the Grand Canyon, but with water flowing down it. Because this is the river here. You see, and it's flowing down this big crack in the land and then continuing down. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's very loud. Mosi Oitunya means the smoke that thunders. You can see all of the smoke, right? All of the mist going up there. And it's so powerful that when there's a full moon out, there are moon bows, which look like the ghosts of rainbows. It's pretty amazing to see. The Great Rift Valley. This region of mountains and deep valleys formed as two parts of Earth's crust, known as plates, pulled apart from each other. This process covered and preserved many fossil remains of our human ancestors, especially around Lake Turkana. The skeleton of an 11 to 13-year-old human ancestor known as Turkana Boy was found surprisingly, at Lake Turkana, hence the name. There's Lake Turkana right here. You can see here it says Great Rift Valley. And throughout this area, up into Ethiopia, have been so many fossil discoveries of ancient hominids. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, it's all because of the soil and the rocks and the composition of this valley, preserving all of those old fossils. It's pretty amazing. Let's see what little boxes we've got here. This one's at Lake Victoria, the largest lake in Africa. Lake Victoria sits in the center of a plateau created by two arms of the Great Rift Valley. You can see the Great Rift Valley continuing down here into the African Great Lakes area. It's labeled Lake Tanganyika right here, and Lake Malawi, also known as Lake Nyasa. Just creating all of these big lakes throughout. Here's Madagascar. Beautiful Madagascar. The fourth largest island in the world, isolated Madagascar has many unique animal species. Especially you see all this green here. There's a big mountain ridge right here, the highlands there. And it creates this gorgeous, thick jungle area where a lot of the typical Madagascar wildlife you think of lives here. But there's lemurs all throughout Madagascar and other fun creatures. Water from the inland Okavango Delta drains into the Kalahari Desert rather than the sea. There's a few examples of inland deltas, and Okavango is like the best example because it's so easy to spot from above. Just like the Nile Delta up there, which fans out into the Mediterranean, this fans out into the desert. Pretty neat, the Kalahari Desert. And there's one more up here, the Niger River. It says the Niger River flows north into the desert before heading south to the coast. Yeah, it goes like, starts over here for one of these rivers, but it goes up, and then just suddenly goes down into Nigeria. And you can see the Niger River Delta right here. Looks like Lake Volta right there, another dammed lake, one of the largest in the world. I think the largest in Africa by volume. Or size, maybe both. Pardon me. That is sub-Saharan Africa. Now we're moving on to West and Central Asia. West and Central Asia. Let's see what we've got here. Look at all this brown. Very dry area, isn't it? Home to many ancient civilizations, West Asia includes Anatolia in Turkey, the Arabian Peninsula, and the Iranian Plateau. Central Asia forms a pathway between this region and China to the east. West Asia is extremely rich in natural resources. Almost half the world's oil comes from the Arabian Peninsula and is the source of much of the region's wealth. Starting up here, we've got Mesopotamia, which you can see right here is the Tigris River and the Euphrates River. And the land between two rivers is Mesopotamia. The lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were historically known as Mesopotamia, which is in modern-day Iraq. This once fertile region was the birthplace of some of the world's earliest civilizations. Today, the climate of the area is not as good for farming as it once was. You can see a big city here. It doesn't say which one it is, but it says cities have existed along the Tigris and Euphrates for thousands of years. Maybe Basra, I don't know. There's lots of cities along the rivers in Iraq here. But yeah, big flowing river, still flowing to this day, even though they're flowing in different areas and directions than they once were. Here's the empty quarter, the Rub al Khali. Cat is scratching at my drawers under the desk. Excuse him. He'll get it out of his system in a minute. Part of the Arabian desert, the Rub al Khali, the empty quarter, is one of the largest continuous bodies of sand in the world. Caravans traded in this region in ancient times, but as the desert has expanded over the centuries, much of the area has become impassable. And here's a gorgeous sand dune here. All the ripples around it. Ridges of sand dunes in the empty quarter can be up to 25 miles long, which is 40 kilometers long. And pretty much when you picture a desert and you see all the sand dunes and stuff, that's what the Rubal Khali is. Just a bunch of big old sand dunes. Here's the Iranian mountains, which I wonder, because they're talking about the Zagros, because there's a lot of mountains throughout Iran. There's the Zagros Mountains. Oh, you can't see. The Zagros Mountains coming down here, making up this area of southern Iran. But then up here is the Alborz Mountains in northern Iran. In the middle is the Iranian Plateau. That makes a good sound. Listen to that. I hope that's picking up. That's such a cool sound. Good job, brush. The nation of Iran is completely surrounded by a series of mountain ranges. Most Iranians live in the mountains around the edge of the country, because the Iranian plateau at the center is filled with inhospitable deserts and salt flats. All these natural barriers make Iran a particularly difficult place for other nations to invade. That's very poignant today. In the Zagros Mountains of Iran, villages are built into the foothills. Now, the Zagros, I've said before on my channel, is just one of the very overrated spots in the world in terms of natural beauty. It is absolutely stunning in these mountains, and these little villages are so picturesque. So amazing. I love exploring Iran on Google Earth. Every picture is 10 out of 10 gorgeousness. Yeah. There's the Central Asian steppes. Up here, steppe landscape. Vast areas of flat lowland grassland known as steppes stretch from Mongolia in the east to Eastern Europe in the west. What a weird sentence. And Eastern Europe in the west, and cover a large part of Central Asia. The flatness of the region makes it easy to travel across quickly. From ancient times, trade between Asia and Europe has passed through the steppes, as did the northern route of the Silk Road. In the 12th century, the Mongols rode through the steppes on their campaigns. More than 40% of Kazakhstan is covered by steppe grasslands. Yeah, the steppe that I've shown a lot on my channel when I'm covering countries throughout the steppe region, especially Kazakhstan. It's just there's nothing there. Like, there's no pictures to show you because it's just nothingness. It's just huge flat land with literally nothing there, which is very beautiful in and of itself, but doesn't make my job very easy when I'm trying to show you geography. There's just nothing. This says the Arabian Desert covers most of the Arabian Peninsula and is an extension of the Sahara in Africa. See the Arabian Peninsula, all of this desert land here. But there's like a misconception about Saudi Arabia, because this is the Tiamat right here. And this area, especially down here, is all extremely green, along the coast of Saudi Arabia heading into Yemen here. Big old forests and misty mountains and all that stuff. It's absolutely stunning. It's not all desert in Saudi Arabia. Here's the Syrian desert up here. And all these mountains. We've got the Anatolia Plateau. Between all the mountains, there's the Taurus Mountains leading into the Zagros Mountains. Here's the Dasht Alut. What a great sound. The Dasht Alut is a salt desert that covers much of eastern Iran. And there's the Dasht Kafir as well. Here's the Karakum Desert. The Karakum Desert is one of the world's largest areas of sand, but not as large as this one. Moving on to the next post-it note. Let's see where we're going next. South and Southeast Asia. See, look at all the green here. Compare that to all the brown. All the brown, and then we have all the green. The Himalayas have played a major role in the history and development of South Asia. They form a barrier with China to the north, and they interact with winds to create a monsoon climate. All right, sorry, I had to cut because my manager just threw up. Poor Jensen, he just had a barfo. He's okay though. That's normal for cats to have barfos every once in a while. Where was I? To create a monsoon climate. For more than half of the year, the region undergoes a long, dry season, followed by a rainy season lasting several months. This affects which crops can be grown and when they can be planted. So let's start over here in the Himalayas. You can see dominate this area here. Himalaya mountains. You can hear them trying to bury it, but I've already cleaned it up, so good luck. The Himalayas. The world's highest mountain range, the Himalayas, stretches more than 1,500 miles or 2,400 kilometers from west to east and includes peaks that reach higher than 26,000 feet or 8,000 meters. The scale of the Himalayas affects the weather to the south, as monsoon winds are blocked from leaving the Indian subcontinent. Many of the world's highest mountain peaks can be found in the Himalayas, which we can see here. Big, huge peaks all throughout. What's neat is that, like, this mountain back here is probably higher than this mountain, but it's so far away. We can't tell. We have this gorgeous river valley. So many rivers flow down from the snowmelt here, including the Ganges, which we're going to talk about next. The Ganges Delta, which is right here. Bangladesh lies at the mouth of two major rivers, the Ganges and the Brahmaputra. At the delta where these rivers meet the sea, annual flooding during the monsoon is necessary to grow rice. But throughout history, the land has been devastated by severe floods, becoming more frequent as sea levels rise due to global warming. The land is so flat that floods spread over fields and villages. You can see here this poor village is flooded. Very sad. Floods are absolutely devastating. But the Ganges floods pretty frequently. I'm in the middle of researching this area right here. You'll see next week on the channel. Here's the Indus Valley. Another river flowing down is the Indus River. Right here. One of the early birthplaces of civilization around the world can be found in the Indus Valley. The fertile lands along the banks of the Indus River and other waterways made for ideal human settlement sites. Ruins of some of the earliest cities in the world can be found here, though they are now farther away from the rivers they were built upon, which have changed course over time. Here's a gorgeous valley here. The rivers of the Indus Valley are still lined with fertile land that is used for farming. I'm sure there'll be a page later on about Mohenjo-daro and all that, but many ancient civilizations lived once along the banks of the Indus. Again, they're more like out here, right? Over here in Pakistan and India. See the Indo-Gangetic plain here. Surprised they didn't show the Thar Desert, but well, Deccan Plateau. We'll look at it all later. So we've got one more box over here. It says trading ideas. Down here. The Himalayas blocked overland routes between India and China, so traders between the two cultures had to travel by sea through Southeast Asia. Indian and Chinese ideas spread throughout the region, particularly the religions of Hinduism and later Buddhism. Though it was not the original source of Buddhism, the island of Java is home to the largest Buddhist temple in the world, Borobudur. Borobudur's on my bucket list too. It's gorgeous. Look at all these big mountain peaks. Very prominent there on Java. Alright, little boxes. Let's go over here. The Moluccas. The 1,000 islands of the Moluccas are the fabled spice islands of history. whose produce attracted traders from around the globe. No boxes here in the Philippines, that's sad. Or Taiwan up here. But we do have one on Borneo. Borneo, the third largest island in the world, is one of the most stable islands in Indonesia with little volcanic activity. I've never thought of that. There's so many volcanoes around this area here, but not so much in Borneo. But we do have here in Sumatra, it says the Indonesian islands are the most volcanic in the world, with more than 220 volcanoes, most of which are still active. So now if you'd asked me what's the most volcanic islands in the world, I would have probably said Japan. But Indonesia makes sense, doesn't it? Look at this big chain of mountains. Coming down. Over here to the Indochina Peninsula, all throughout here. The humid climate and numerous rivers and flat plains makes mainland Southeast Asia ideal for growing rice. I think that's all the boxes there. I think so. North China Plain up here. Another good sound. Yep, looks like it. Moving on. North and East Asia, the land. Look at all the mountains here. We went from brown to green to peaks. I don't know how to big snowy peaks here. You can still see the Himalayas down here. Let's see what it says. Mountains, deserts, and jungles form a natural barrier between East Asia and the rest of the world. Natural features have protected the civilizations of East Asia somewhat from outside forces, allowing them to maintain a continuous culture. One of the oldest cultures is that of China, which has influenced the region for thousands of years. Looks like we're going to start in Siberia, though, over here. Siberia, which is up here. You can see the West Siberian Plain, the Central Siberian Plain. All this area here. Stretching across an area of more than 5 million square miles, or 13 million square kilometers, Siberia forms 3/4 of Russia's territory, but less than 1/4 of its population lives there. This vast expanse contains most of Russia's mineral wealth, from coal and oil to precious metals, but they are far from civilization. Industrial complexes have been constructed in remote areas to process minerals, which are then transported to the west along rail routes or pipelines. Overground pipelines transport Siberian oil to the west through a landscape of tundra, rivers, and swamps. You can see this big pipeline here, cutting across this river through the snow. We'll read all these boxes later. Here's the Tarim Basin. Carved out by an ancient glacial lake, the Tarim Basin is partially filled by the Taklamakan Desert to the south. The basin was an important site of trade routes out of China, such as the Silk Road, which took 2 paths around the desert. These days, the Taklamakan is surrounded by rail routes, and China is interested in reviving overland trade routes in the region. Ruins of ancient waypoints on the Silk Road can be found throughout the Tarim Basin. Yeah, there's the Taklamakan right here in China. And you normally don't think, you don't normally associate desert with China, but there is a huge desert right here in China. We'll read all the little boxes later. Let's head to the North China Plain, which I was brushing earlier. Fed by the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, the fertile lands of the North China Plain were the site of one of the world's earliest centers of civilization. But the region has also been subject to disastrous floods across the centuries. The lands that border the rivers of the North China Plain are ideal for farming. Got all kinds of yellow something or other growing, maybe yellow mustard, I don't know. Probably what gives the Yellow River its name, because I bet all this blows into the river. Yeah, I know the Yellow River's also known as China's Sorrow because it's caused so much destruction from flooding. Then here are the Japanese islands. The islands of Japan formed where two plates of the Earth's crust meet, pushing up its mountains. This makes the islands prone to volcanic activity and earthquakes, and the mountainous regions inland are sparsely inhabited. Throughout history, most Japanese people have lived in settlements along the coasts, and as a result, Japan has developed into a seafaring nation. Cities and the roads between them are generally found along Japan's coasts. You can see what I assume must be Tokyo there because there's Mount Fuji. Beautiful Mount Fuji. All right, let's see all these little boxes. We've got the Kamchatka Peninsula up here. It says the Kamchatka Peninsula at the very edge of Siberia was created by volcanic activity. It's still very volcanic today. Here's the Korean Peninsula. Surrounded on three sides by water, hence peninsula, South Korea has become a leading ocean fishing nation. South Korea down here. North China Plain we looked at. There's the Manchurian Plain, the Sichuan Basin. Back to the Himalayas, it looks like. The Himalayas have formed a natural border between the cultures of East and South Asia for thousands of years. Now we can see the Himalayas creating the Tibetan Plateau, the largest and highest elevated plateau in the world. We can see the mountains up here, Kunlun Shan, the Tian Shan, and the Altun Shan. There's the Gobi Desert here. There's another one up here in Siberia. The West Siberian Plain is the world's largest area of flat land. I would have said the Central Asian steppe, but it's the West Siberian Plain. I'm learning so much about geography. There's another plateau, what does that say? The Putorana Plateau? I've never heard of that one. And then there's the oh goodness, it's Russian. Hold on. The Verkhoyatsky Range. I tried. I'm just going to give up and continue on. I'm not going to spend 5 minutes trying to pronounce that. My apologies, any Russian or Russian-speaking viewers. Moving on to Europe. The small continent of Europe has a diverse landscape, but it doesn't have many extremes. There are no large deserts or rainforests, and natural disasters are rare. The climate is generally mild, and minerals and other resources are not hard to find. These advantages gave Europe a technological and economic edge over other continents, parts of which were colonized and exploited by European nations. Looks like we're starting in the North Sea. It says rich in resources. Europe has many sources of cool oil and natural gas. Access to these resources was a key factor in the Industrial Revolution that began in the 18th century. Because Europe was able to modernize first, it has had a head start on technological and economic development. Large fields of oil and natural gas under the North Sea are extracted by oil platforms. You can see here. Lots of oil in the North Sea. We've got fertile farming, looks like central France are pointing at. The climate of North and West Europe is ideal for farming crops. Grassy plains across the continent are used as pastures for dairy farming. Europe has excellent transportation links, so fresh milk can be delivered almost anywhere. France has the largest area of fertile land in Western Europe, ideal for both crops and livestock. You can see some sweet cows here grazing along the mountain slopes. Looks like there's some maybe Pyrenees or Alps in the background there, or other mountains throughout France. We've got the European plain. It's like all throughout Russia here. And I guess into like Ukraine down here, and along eastern Asia there by the Carpathians. And I guess into like Finland, the Baltic states. Anyway, I'm going to read. A huge area of flat land runs from the Pyrenees across northern Europe to the Ural Mountains. Okay, apparently it's just all throughout here. Not just Russia. All throughout. Pretty cool. It widens out significantly into a massive plain as it approaches Russia, offering no natural defenses such as mountains. The history of Russia has been one of expansion as it tries to create its own boundaries to the west by putting more land between itself and its rivals in Western Europe. Hold on, my manager's having a talk with my new employee, Russell. You can hear them growling. 1 second. Okay, disagreement resolved there. Let's see. The massive plain across Eastern Europe makes for perfect farmland. We just talked about Ukraine on the channel and how, important that farmland is to not just like Ukraine, but like all of European history. And we have one more box down here, trade rivers. The countries of Europe have always been heavily involved in trade, and this is partly due to the many natural harbors and rivers across the continent. Europe's rivers don't have lots of waterfalls and rapids, so they are easy for boats to navigate, and they are also not too wide for bridges to cross. Cities on the banks of Europe's rivers, such as the Danube, which flows through 10 countries on its journey to the Black Sea, have always been important trade centers. I wonder if that's Budapest there. I can't really tell, but you can see. Oh no, because that's an Eastern Orthodox church right there. So maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe it's, not the Danube flows through Russia. Maybe it's in Romania. I don't know. But we can see a river barge here. Well, they've got Eastern Orthodox churches in all countries anyway. You can see the Danube here, but it flows. You can see all the tributaries throughout, and it flows up to the Danube Delta, which is in Romania. We've got all the mountain ranges here. It says mountain ranges such as the Alps form natural boundaries between many European nations. And there's the big Alps there, heading into the Apennines here in Italy. There's the Carpathians, and the Pyrenees right here. What else up here? In Norway, looks like it says Europe is the continent with the most coastline relative to its size. And Norway has a huge coastline because of all the fjords and islands throughout. And then we have the Ural Mountains. 1,550 miles or 2,500 kilometers long, the Ural Mountains divide European Russia from the rest of Russia and Asia. And then, of course, there's also the Caucasus Mountains here. The Caucasus Mountains create a natural boundary between Europe and Western Asia. Yeah, it's always tricky because whenever there's trivia about like what creates the boundary between Europe and Asia, like usually the answer is the Urals, but don't forget the Caucasus Mountains. They're there too. Moving on. What's next? Oceania. Not a lot of land to look at in Oceania. This one's mostly blue, isn't it? Lots of ocean in Oceania. Some of the oldest land on Earth can be found at the center of Australia in Oceania. The region also has some of the newest land, as volcanic islands in the Pacific bring new material to the surface from beneath Earth's crust. Humans first arrived in Australia more than 60,000 years ago, but Polynesian settlers only arrived in New Zealand, the last large group of Pacific islands to be discovered less than 1,000 years ago. Oh, we get to talk about Nauru. Let's go. I could talk about Nauru all day long. The tiny island of Nauru has been exploited for its phosphate, a chemical used to make fertilizers, for more than a century by foreign companies. The mining process has removed the fertile land, making the Nauruans totally reliant on the phosphate industry. Now that phosphates have run out, the major source of the island's income has disappeared, and Nauruans face an uncertain future. Today, Nauruans live along the thin strip of vegetation left around the coast. Although I know that the Nauruan government is, I'm going to not yap about it because I could go on. The Nauruan government is trying to find ways to utilize the land in the center, but it's going to take a lot, and they're selling passports to try to anyway. Let's look at beautiful New Guinea. The second largest island in the world after Greenland, New Guinea was once part of the same landmass as Australia, but they separated when the sea rose about 8,000 years ago, creating the Torres Strait here, which it's not labeled. You can see the Arafura Sea here, and the Coral Ocean. Normally I call it the Coral Sea, but okay. The Great Barrier Reef there, which looks like there's no boxes for the Great Barrier Reef. That's so sad. But there is for the Australian outback. More than 80% of Australia is covered by the outback, a vast area of inland wilderness formed of deserts, mountains, savanna, and forests. Most Australians live on the coast, so the interior has remained one of the largest intact natural areas on the planet. Red deserts are a typical feature of the outback, though not all of the wilderness is desert. A beautiful red soil there of the outback. Beautiful landscape. You can see all the different areas there. The Western Plateau, the Great Victoria Desert, the Nullarbor Plain, the Great Sandy Desert, the Kimberley Plateau. All these areas throughout the outback. Volcanic islands. Looks like we're looking at Hawaii up here. Some Pacific islands, such as those of Hawaii, were formed from volcanic activity. The largest volcano in the world is in Hawaii, rising more than 17 kilometers or 10.5 miles from its base on the ocean floor. The soil of these islands is extremely fertile, ideal for growing sugarcane and a variety of tropical fruits. There are 6 active volcanoes in Hawaii, including 4 on the Big Island alone. You can see all the steam rising up there. Mauna Kea, by the way, is the biggest volcano in the world. And technically higher than Everest if you count all of the mountain below the sea, but most people don't. The Coral Islands here, or just coral islands in general, the coral atolls. Many of the tiny islands that dot the Pacific are not formed from rock, but instead from coral. Most of these islands are not suitable for humans to live on because they barely rise above sea level and are at the mercy of storms and other extreme weather. But the seafaring people of the Pacific have been able to survive on the larger coral islands, fishing in the reefs and grazing animals on the land. A series of small coral islands have formed very close to the coast of the volcanic island of Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. You can see right there. That's how atolls form when volcanoes rise and the coral grows around it. But eventually, these mountains collapse down into the sea as they erupt, just leaving this ring of coral, and that's how you get atolls. Let's see what we've got. French Polynesia is over here. French Polynesia is made up of 130 islands, but 70% of the population lives on the largest island, Tahiti. There. New Zealand, pointing at the North Island here. The islands of New Zealand were formed when 2 plates of Earth's crust meet, making them prone to earthquakes and volcanic activity. And lots happening up here. You can see the Southern Alps here on the South Island. The Great Dividing Range separates coastal cities from Australia's dry interior. Here's the Great Dividing Range, which most people live along the coast here in Australia, or, up here, and then in the other side over here. Not so much here, but there are people there, of course. More French Polynesia. French Polynesia is made up of 130 islands, but oops, that's not true. See, this is Vanuatu, right, Jet? Jet's here to inspect, right? This is Vanuatu. There's an error in the book here. New Caledonia is part of French, or France, I guess, French Polynesia, but this is Vanuatu. There's an error in my book. This is Vanuatu. Just so you know. It's a fact about Vanuatu. They filmed a season of Survivor there. Anyway. The second largest island. Oh, I accidentally read this already. My bad. Oh my goodness. Okay. How weird that they've made an error there. Interesting. Moving on to North America. North America. Stretching from the frozen wastes of the Arctic Circle to the humid rainforests of Panama, North America is a continent of diverse environments and climates. The landscape has greatly affected its history. Humans first crossed into North America from Asia over a land bridge that later disappeared as sea levels rose. Indigenous cultures were largely isolated from the rest of the world until the arrival of Europeans in the 11th century. Let's start in the Canadian Shield. All this up here. Covering around 50% of Canada, the Canadian Shield is a vast area of exposed rock, barely covered with soil. The land is not suitable for farming, and most of Canada's population live farther to the south. Covered in forests, the Canadian Shield is a rich resource for timber. There's a great picture here of all of the forests throughout, and of course all of the lakes and rivers that just dot this area here. And all the big sheer cliff faces as well. Big mountain peaks up there, but not as much as over here, right? Which we're going to talk about next. Look at that segue. Mountain barrier. The Rocky Mountains run along the western coast of the continent. Oops, that's a cat playing with toys, my bad. And peak at 14,440 feet, or 4,400 meters. They were once a formidable barrier to European migrants on their way to the Pacific after the easy crossing of the flat Great Plains. Dense forests lie along parts of the western side of the Rockies. Yeah, so I live about here, near this big basin here, or the rest of my family lives in this basin here in southern Washington. But I live up in the forest here. And right now, as I'm filming this, there's a huge storm in the Rockies. And we're not getting any of the storm, but we're getting all of the wind and cold blowing down on us. It's very chilly. Brr, brr, brr. But once that lets up, apparently we're getting heat. So, looking forward to that. I'm like enjoying spring, but I'm kind of ready for summer, you know. Desert borders. A series of deserts form a natural barrier between the U.S. and Mexico to the south. These regions contain some of the hottest and most inhospitable places on Earth. The Sonoran Desert covers areas of both the U.S. and Mexico. So yeah, we can see the stretch of desert down here, starting in the Great Basin Desert, which I used to live in when I lived in Reno, Nevada. You can see the Great Salt Lake right there in Utah. The Mojave Desert, the Sonoran Desert, and the Chihuahuan Desert, which we just did a video on last week. Or at least most of the Chihuahuan Desert. Here's the Great Plains. I'm not reading this yet. I'm not falling for this again. We're going to read about Central America, shaped by extremes. The lands of Central America and the Caribbean are prone to volcanic activity, which creates fertile farmland, but eruptions, earthquakes, and extreme weather also make for difficult living conditions for the inhabitants. Arenal volcano in Costa Rica last erupted from 1968 to 2010, and there's beautiful Arenal. Just a very stereotypical volcano, my favorite kind. Big volcanoes here in Central America. Here's the Mississippi Basin, which is all this area here, all this fertile green created by the Mississippi River. The massive drainage basin of the Mississippi River spreads from the Appalachians to the Rockies, creating a huge area of fertile land suitable for farming. Farms and woodlands line the banks of the Mississippi River in Iowa. There's the mighty Mississippi flowing down past this farmland here. It says it's in Iowa. Now let's read all the little boxes. the St. Lawrence River, which flows this way. The St. Lawrence River has always been important for trade, connecting the Great Lakes with the Atlantic. The Great Lakes being Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Michigan, and Lake Superior, one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world, but not as big as Lake Baikal. There's the Appalachian Mountains, the Mississippi Basin we talked about. Here's the Great Plains. The broad flatlands of the Great Plains are rich in farmland, but in the 1930s, over-farming contributed to a period of drought and dust storms in the region. Whenever I'm talking about the Eurasian steppe or the Central Asian steppe, I compare it to the Great Plains. It's very similar, but I think much more empty than the Great Plains. Let's look at Panama real quick. It says the opening of the Panama Canal in 1914 greatly reduced the time ships took to travel between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. We're going to be talking about Panama this week, about this area right here. We're going to look at in Panama. Look forward to that. Is there any more? Oh, Greenland has a little box. Once hidden under sheets of ice, Greenland's minerals have become more accessible as global warming melts the ice. Big old Greenland, the largest island in the world, as it said multiple times throughout this book. All right. Let's move it along. Looks like we got one more, and I'm guessing it's South America. Dun-dun. South America. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. A continent of extremes. South America ranges from tropical forests in the north to mountains in the west to icy coastlines in the south. This geography also isolates different regions from each other. The Andes Mountains split the west from the east, while in the heart of the rainforest, the Amazon River separates the north of the continent from the south. These divisions have created a variety of indigenous cultures on the continent. Let's start with the Amazon. Look at that river basin here, the mighty Amazon. Look at all the tributaries flowing off of it or into it, and flowing out here into the Amazon Delta, which there's a box about, so we'll wait for that. The Amazon Basin, one of the biggest wilderness areas in the world. The Amazon Basin is almost as large as Australia. Wow. The rainforest that covers the basin holds great mineral wealth and is home to more than 3 million types of plants and animals, as well as 400 groups of indigenous peoples. The continued existence of the species and cultures of the Amazon is under threat, as forest is cut down to build mines and to create pasture for grazing cattle. The Amazon River has no bridges along its entire length. That's another fun trivia fact. How many bridges cross the Amazon? 0. Not even in Manaus. The Amazon Basin. The Altiplano, you can see right here. Altiplano. In the middle of the Andes lies the second highest plateau in the world, the Altiplano, Spanish for high plain. It was previously part of the Inca Empire, and Inca people still live here, raising alpaca and vicuña, which are relatives of the llama. The Altiplano holds Lake Titicaca, South America's largest lake and the highest lake in the world. Someone's got zoomies, my goodness. The Altiplano is home to the largest salt flat in the world, the Salar de Uyuni. Yeah, that's the sound of letterbox. Someone's got pee-pee zooms. Yeah, that's the Salar de Uyuni. Great salt plain, and there's little vicuñas right there. Do you see them? And the big mountains in the background. Let's find it. The Salar de Uyuni is right here. And then there's Lake Titicaca in between Bolivia and Peru. There's more of the Andes down here. The Andes Mountains run the entire length of the continent from north to south. They are mostly impassable, separate the west coast from the rest of the continent. I think that's and separate the western coast from the rest of the continent. Okay, another typo we found. It says Chile's capital, Santiago, lies in the plain between the Andes and the coast. Guessing that's Santiago there, and there's big mountains there. Someone's going poopy. It's stinky. Yuck, yuck, yuck. Let me get through this so I can scoop that up. My cats have the smelliest poops in the world. Coastal cities. European colonizers stuck to the coast of Brazil because there was little reason to put the effort into taming the wilderness inland. Today, 90% of Brazilians live in towns and cities on the Atlantic coast. The cliffs of the Brazilian highlands limit the expansion of these cities into the interior. It says the former capital of Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, is built on land between mountains and sea. This is an interesting angle you don't normally see of Rio. I'm guessing that's Sugarloaf right there. And Copacabana, maybe? Christ the Redeemer's maybe up there. I'm not sure. I've never seen it from like this angle. It's usually this angle you see it from. Interesting. Alright, little boxes. Let's start up here. The Orinoco River flows through the flat plain of the Llanos in Venezuela, where it floods during the rainy season. Big old Orinoco. Oh dear, poopy's happening. My goodness, my stinky cats. You can see the Llanos there. The Llanos plain. Deposits brought down the Amazon and its tributaries have created the Ilha de Marajo, an island that formed at the delta where the Amazon meets the ocean. Right there. This big old delta, which is all very like goopy from all the minerals here. Not a good place to go swimming there. The Brazilian highlands run from the edge of the Amazon basin to the Atlantic Ocean. We've got the Pampas down here. The broad, flat plains of the Pampas region are home to herds of cattle and their ranchers known as gauchos. If you know Pampas grass, it comes from the Pampas. We've got the Gran Chaco right here. I'm trying to find other little bits, but I don't see any more. Till we get to Patagonia. As the cold southern tip of the continent, Patagonia is a huge area of sparsely populated plains and towering mountains. And I think we're done. I think we got through it. My goodness. All right. I need to go scoop some poop. So I'm going to end this video real quick. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this style of content, please consider subscribing. I believe, let me check my calendar. Next we're going to read all of the chapters about African history. So be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good